Hi there, Colin. Welcome to Colin's Reading Aloud Project Part 134. 1,000 words or so, starting now. Intergrading, intergraft, intergrafted, intergrafting, intergrafts, intergranular, intergrew, intergroup, intergrow, intergrowing, intergrown, intergrows, intergrowth, intergrowths, interim, interims, interindividual, interindustry, interinfluence, interinfluenced, interinfluences, interinvolve, interinvolved, interinvolves, interinvolving, interionic, interior, interiorization, interiorize, interiorized, interiorizes, interiorizing, interiorities, interiority, interiorization, interiorize, interiorized, interiorizes, interiorizing, interiorly, interiors, inter-island, interjacencies, interjacency, interjacent, interjaculate, interjaculated, interjaculates, interjaculating, interjaculatory, interject, interjected, interjecting, interjection, interjectional, interjectionary, interjections, interjector, interjectors, interjectory, interjects, interjectural, interjoin, interjoined, interjoining, interjoins, interkineses, interkinesis, interknit, interknits, interknitted, interknitting, interknot, interknots, interknotted, interknotting, interlace, interlaced, interlacedly, interlacement, interlacements, interlaces, interlacing, interlacustrine, interlaid, interlamina, interlaminate, interlaminated, interlaminates, interlaminating, interlamination, interlap, interlapped, interlapping, interlaps, interlard, interlarded, interlarding, interlards, interlay, interlayer, interlayered, interlayering, interlayers, interlaying, interlays, interleaf, interleave, interleaved, interleaves, interleaving, interlend, interlending, interlens, interlent, interleukin, interleukins, interlibrary, interline, interlineal, interlineally, interlinear, interlineally, interlinears, interlineate, interlineated, interlineates, interlineating, interlineation, interlineations, interlined, interliner, interliners, interlines, interlingua, interlingual, interlingually, interlinguers, interlining, interlinings, interlink, interlinked, interlinking, interlinks, interloan, interloans, interlobular, interlocal, interlocation, interlocations, interlock, interlocked, interlocker, interlockers, interlocking, interlocks, interlocution, interlocutions, interlocutor, interlocutorally, interlocutors, interlocutory, interlocutress, interlocutrice, interlocutrices, interlocutrix, interlocutrixes, interloop, interlooped, interlooping, interloops, interlope, interloped, interloper, interlopers, interlopes, interloping, interlude, interluded, interludes, interludial, interluding, interlunar, interlunary, interlunation, interlunations, intermale, intermarginal, intermarriage, intermarriages, intermarried, intermarries, intermarry, intermarrying, intermat, intermats, intermatted, intermatting, intermaxilla, intermaxillae, intermaxillary, intermeddle, intermeddler, intermeddlers, intermeddles, intermeddling, intermedia, intermediacies, intermediacy, intermedial, intermediaries, intermediary, intermediate, intermediated, intermediately, intermediates, intermediating, intermediation, intermediations, intermediator, intermediators, intermediatory, intermedian, intermedians, intermedium, intermediums, intermembrane, intermenstrual, interment, interments, intermesh, intermeshed, intermeshes, intermeshing, intermetallic, intermetallics, intermezzi, intermezzo, intermezzos, intermigration, intermigrations, interminability, interminable, interminably, intermingle, intermingled, intermingles, intermingling, intermission, intermissions, intermissive, intermit, intermitotic, intermits, intermitted, intermittence, intermittences, intermittencies, intermittency, intermittent, intermittently, intermitter, intermitters, intermitting, intermittingly, intermitto, intermittors, intermix, intermixed, intermixes, intermixing, intermixture, intermixtures, intermodal, intermodulation, intermolecular, intermont, intermontane, intermountain, intermundane, intermure, intermured, intermures, intermuring, intermuscular, internal, internalization, internalize, internalized, internalizes, internalizing, internalities, internality, internalization, internalize, internalized, internalizes, internalizing, internally, internalness, internalnesses, internals, international, internationally, internationals, intern, internicine, internissive, interned, internee, internees, interns, internet, internets, interneural, interneuron, interneuronal, interneurons, interning, internist, internists, internment, internments, internodal, internode, internodes, internodial, interns, internship, internships, internuclear, internucleon, internucleonic, internucleotide, internuncial, internuncio, internuncios, interobserver, interoceanic, interoception, interoceptions, interoceptive, interoceptor, interoceptors, interocular, interoffice, interoperable, interoperative, interorbital, interorgan, interosculant, interosculate, interosculated, interosculates, interosculating, interosculation, interosseal, interosseous, interpage, interpaged, interpages, interpaging, interpandemic, interparietal, interparish, interparochial, interparoxysmal, interparticle, interparty, interpellant, interpellants, interpellate, interpellated, interpellates, interpellating, interpellation, interpellations, interpellator, interpellators, interpenetrable, interpenetrant, interpenetrate, interpenetrated, interpenetrates, interperceptual, interpermeate, interpermeated, interpermeates, interpermeating, interpersonal, interpersonally, interpatiolar, interphalangeal, interphase, interphases, interphone, interphones, interpilaster, interpilasters, interplanetary, interplant, interplanted, interplanting, interplants, interplay, interplayed, interplaying, interplays, interplead, interpleaded, interpleader, interpleaders, interpleading, interpleads, interpled, interplural, interpluvial, interpluvials, interpoint, interpoints, interpolable, interpolar, interpolate, interpolated, interpolator, interpolators, interpolates, interpolating, interpolation, interpolations, interpolative, interpolator, interpolators, interpone, interponed, interpones, interponing, interpopulation, interposable, interposal, interposals, interpose, interposed, interposer, interposers, interposes, interposing, interposition, interpositions, interpret, interpretable, interpretably, interpretate, interpretated, interpretates, interpretating, interpretation, interpretations, interpretative, interpreted, interpreter, interpreters, interpretership, interpretess, interpretesses, interpreting, interpretive, interpretively, interpretress, interpretresses, interprets, interprovincial, interproximal, interpsychic, interpunction, interpunctions, interpunctuate, interpunctuated, interpunctuates, interpupillary, interquartile, interrace, interracial, interracially, interradial, interradially, interradii, interradius, interradiuses, interrail, interrailed, interrailer, interrailers, interrailing, interrails, interramal, interred, interregal, interreges, interregional, interregna, interregnal, interregnum, interregnums, interrelate, interrelated, interrelatedly, interrelates, interrelating, interrelation, interrelations, interreligious, interrenal, interrex, interring, interring, interrobang, interrobangs, interrogable, interrogant, interrogants, interrogate, interrogated, interrogatee, interrogatees, interrogates, interrogating, interrogatingly, interrogation, interrogational, interrogations, interrogative, interrogatively, interrogatives, interrogator, interrogatories, interrogatorily, interrogators, interrogatory, interrogee, interrogees, interrow, interrow, interrupt, interrupted, interruptedly, interrupter, interrupters, interruptible, interrupting, interruption, interruptions, interruptive, interruptively, interruptor, interruptors, interrupts, inters, interscapular, interscholastic, interschool, interscribe, interscribed, interscribes, interscribing, intersect, intersected, intersecting, intersection, intersectional. Oh, I'll have to stop there.